afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. This is a Stand By What You Sell Integrity Systems Company webinar, which we've partnered with Queensland Government, Department of Agriculture and Fisheries. So thank you very much for joining. My name's Cherie Young. I'm the Communications Manager at Integrity Systems Company, and I'll be facilitating our webinar today. We've got a range of topics to cover. Just to give you a bit of a run through of what we're going to be going through, we've got Elizabeth Bradley, who's Integrity Systems Quality and Compliance Manager. She's going to take you through the LPA requirements under the Livestock Production Assurance Program. I'm going to come in after that and give you an update on the eNVD and where that's at the moment. And then Elizabeth will give you a bit of an update on the NLIS system as well in relation to that. Then David McNabb's will join us from Biosecurity Queensland, and he's going to give you an overview of sheep and goat eID implementation and where that's up to from a Queensland perspective. And then after David's finished his section, we've got a few like a compilation of questions and answers from some producers from around the country who've already implemented eID as early adopters. First one is Scott Young from Victoria. He's been using eID for a number of years under the Victorian rules, and he joined our webinar a couple of weeks ago to talk about the benefits he's finding with it. Russell Fowler from Tasmania will also be included in that package of questions, and Jenny Bradley from New South Wales. So that's later on. Before I hand over to Elizabeth, I just wanted to let you know that this we've got a Q&A box going in this webinar, and we encourage you to put your questions in as they come to mind. We've got a team of people from Integrity Systems Company ready and willing to answer your questions. David McNabb's also there to handle any government-related questions. In the coming days, we'll have a post-webinar email that will come out with the recording from today, plus the question and answer transcript and any other resources that we've got that we think might help with what we're covering. So please pop your questions in as they come to mind, and we'll do our best to answer them. So I think that covers off what we're going to talk about today. So now I'll hand over to Elizabeth, who can take you through the LPA requirements. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Cherie. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So just for reference, as a reminder, Integrity Systems Company fits into the MLA company. So we are a fully owned subsidiary of Meat Livestock Australia, and we work to provide the integrity systems for the red meat industry. So we're guided by industry as well as government in terms of providing what we do. So it's just a little reminder about where we sit in the industry. Oh no. Okay, so today I'm going to run you through the LPA requirements and the National Livestock Identification System requirements. So LPA is your on-farm assurance program, which gives you access to the national vendor declarations, which you need to use when selling and moving livestock in Australia. And also the National Livestock Identification System, which is around the identification and tracing of livestock. So with these two programs, they work together to underpin market access, which is how we sell our red meat overseas as well as domestically in Australia. So they work really hard together to ensure that we can provide assurance to our customers that the livestock we are raising for our meat and our food is safe to eat, and it's also meeting animal welfare expectations as well. So critically around NLIS as well as the biosecurity requirements, especially if we need to trace in an emergency as well. So I'm going to walk you through the LPA program today, as well as the requirements and what you need to do in case you do get selected for audit within LPA. So just as a refresher on the LPA requirements, so we just need to make sure that we, if you do need an LPA accreditation, you can do that via the LPA website. You need to keep your account details up to date so that we can keep in touch with you. You also need to maintain your accreditation, so that's recompleting a reaccreditation every 3 years to maintain that access to the LPA NVDs. And you also need to meet the on-farm requirements, which is contained in the LPA standards, which I'll walk you through in just a moment. And that's around how you keep records and those records that you then use to back up the declarations you make on those national vendor declarations. The third thing with LPA is that you can be audited. So it is a requirement if you join the program that you participate in an audit if selected. We have a bunch of random audits we pick just to verify that there's a general level of compliance in the industry, as well as targeted audits when we have issues with, slides have gone, when we have issues with compliance. So with LPA, just waiting for the slides to pop back on, there are 7 different requirements. So there's property risk assessments, which is around identifying risks on your properties and controlling them. We also have safe and responsible animal treatments, which is all around treating animals with veterinary drugs and treatments. We have crop foods, fodder stock foods. Sorry. We also have preparation for dispatch of livestock and livestock transactions and movements, which is around NLIS and those NVDs. The next one in LPA is biosecurity, and then also the animal welfare requirements. We also have all this learning available on our website as well, if you do need any help with understanding the requirements in further detail. So I'm going to run you through the requirements now. Sorry, the slides are a bit out of order. We're just having some technical difficulties on our end. So the first one in LPA is actually the property risk assessment. And that talks around how you manage risks on your property. So risks on your property can cause contamination in livestock once they become meat, so at that processing level. So it's all around managing contamination risks from old dip sites, machinery you might have on your property. If there's other sources of contamination, such as old batteries or treated timbers or things of that nature. So it's really about identifying them, having a clear understanding where they are, and then excluding livestock from those areas so they don't become contaminated. The other part with this is if they are actually contaminated, that's okay. It's just about identifying those stock and then declaring them on those NVDs as a potential risk, so that the person who's buying your livestock know that they might need to do something special with it, or the processors might need to know they need to do extra checks upon processing. So that's the main requirements around property risk assessment. The next one we'll talk a little bit more about is the safe and responsible animal treatments. So this one's got two kind of elements into it. So one is making sure that we're giving an appropriate dose of the treatment to the animal, so it's actually an effective dose. The second one is around keeping good records in relation to those treatments and understanding the withhold periods or the export slaughter intervals and communicating those on the NVDs. So that the people buying your livestock know what they should be doing with them, especially if you're going into processing, to understand the risk of residues in the meat tissue. So around safe and responsible animal treatments, person administering the treatments needs to be aware of what they're doing. So under vet advice, trained, know how to use the equipment, know how to calibrate it. Good record keeping around this, so full records of what you've treated with, who's done the treatment, what animals you've treated, the batch, the expiry date, also in relation to the animal treatments, the withhold periods and the export slaughter intervals are really important to retain. Identifying any animals that might have broken needles is also important, and having access to all withhold and export slaughter intervals from the APVMA is also a handy tool. The other thing with animal treatments is around hormonal growth promotants, or HGPs. So again, they're widely used in Australia, especially in relation to growing our animals a bit quicker. So there's actually some restrictions around HGPs, especially when we're looking to sell overseas in big markets like the EU, the UK and China, because they actually don't want red meat that's been treated with HGPs. So if you are using HGPs, it's important you have really good records in relation to purchase and use and identifying those animals. So using a triangular ear punch, making sure that you know which ones are treated and which ones are not. And then when you're actually moving those animals off your property, being sure to declare them as HGP treated on that NVD, because it can cause you problems at processing, and it could potentially shut down access to an export market if we get it wrong. So really, really important around HGP use in cattle. Thanks, Alistair. So the next one is around the use of chemicals on your property generally, which is around that, you know, spraying chemicals on pasture, incoming food, so hay, grain, fodder, what it is you might be buying in. So it's all around, again, chemical use. So making sure that when you're, you know, spraying or buying in products from outside of the property, that you're aware of the withhold periods, that if you are using chemicals, the person's trained appropriately, and you're keeping full records of where you've treated, what you've treated with, the chemical name, the chemical batch, also the withhold periods, so you know when to allow animals to go back in and graze that area. If you're bringing in food for your livestock, it's around getting a commodity vendor declaration or other records to provide assurance to you that you know that that's not been treated with a chemical. And the goal here is to make sure they're not being exposed to chemicals and then have a residue in them when they go to processing. So we, again, mitigating that food safety risk and that chemical residue risk at processing. If animals do accidentally become contaminated or graze while they're in withholding period, or you need to feed stock food to them while it's being treated or something of that nature, that's okay. It's just, again, about identifying them and declaring them on that NVD as a residue risk. So the next one we're going to talk about is preparing livestock for dispatch. So this one is around fit to load requirements. So there's the MLA fit to load guide, which is a really helpful resource you can refer to, and it's all around minimising stress and contamination and making sure that the livestock you're loading onto trucks can actually make that journey. So this is really important to have, you know, reputable transporters, complete your LPA NVDs correctly, making sure that you're following curfews if you need to, and doing those pre-inspections to make sure that those animals are fit to load and going to survive that journey. So that one's really important as it does, you know, have a lot of community expectation when livestock are on trucks and out being moved around. So the next requirement in LPA is around biosecurity. So this one's got a lot of attention recently, especially in relation to the risk of foot and mouth disease that we saw late last year and early this year. So within LPA, you need to have a documented biosecurity management plan, and that's a requirement about your property and what you can do to control biosecurity or risks coming onto your property and getting established. So with this, you can use the LPA template or any other template that's available in industry to complete this plan, but it is a requirement that you have one documented, and it's always good to review it at least annually and make sure your staff are aware of it and know where it is. So around biosecurity management, it's around controlling, you know, people and things and livestock coming onto your property. And when they do come onto your property, making sure that you've got some controls in place that you can practically and reasonably put in place. So things about introducing livestock, so getting animal health declarations from the person you're buying them from, putting them in quarantine for a little while, keeping them in a fenced off area or something of that nature so you can monitor them for signs of disease or allow them to empty out to reduce that weed load. The other things you can do around biosecurity is also making sure your fences are in good condition, having up your biosecurity plans, signs, and also monitoring areas is the stopgap there. So keeping an eye on your property, keeping an eye on your livestock as well is also really important. The other thing around biosecurity is knowing what to do if there is an issue or an emergency problem happening. So who to contact in relation to a livestock disease issue, so your local animal health officer, a local veterinarian, or the animal disease hotline. So having those numbers available and ready at hand is also really important. And also keeping good records of people coming and going onto your property. So visitors logs are important here. And again, it's all about what's reasonable and what you can control, and what's relevant to your property. So it's really important to have a think about it and use the templates because they're really good guidance pieces of information. I do apologise, the slides seem to be crashing on us. I'll persevere as best as I can. The next requirement I'll talk to you about is animal welfare in LPA. So animal welfare is all in relation to the animal standards and guidelines, which are the nationally agreed standards and guidelines for animal welfare. With that, it's all around having access to a copy of them. So they're free, they're available, you can have them on your computer or print them out. Having a good read of them and understanding what you're expected to be doing, as well as understanding guidelines are there to help you meet those standards. Other things you can do is complete the animal welfare training through the LPA system, through your account. And that's actually a requirement of the LPA standards as well. Also, training your staff if they're involved in animal husbandry is also a really important outcome in relation to animal welfare. So everyone's aware of their requirements in relation to that. The next requirement in around LPA, which kind of ties us into the NLIS requirements, which we'll talk about just a little bit, is around livestock transactions and movements. So this is where we're talking about NVDs, identifying animals, and our NLIS transfers, or that traceability aspect. So around livestock transactions and movements, when selling or moving livestock off your property, you need to complete an LPA NVD. When you're buying in livestock, you also need to obtain a copy of an LPA NVD for those livestock moving onto your property as well, and keep those records for the appropriate amount of time. As well as with livestock movements, if you're buying livestock in or you're moving them onto your property, you need to complete the NLIS transfer for those livestock coming onto your property. It's your responsibility as the receiver of livestock to do that. The other thing is also when livestock move off your property, making sure they have an NLIS identification device on them, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail in just a bit. But this is all really important because we need to be able to trace livestock, and those national vendor declarations provide the food safety and treatment history of those animals, which is needed through the supply chain to for the food safety element of that and providing that assurance. The traceability elements tie into, food safety if there's an incident, disease tracking, and also that biosecurity lens as well. With NVDs, though, it's really important to make sure that they're valid. The paper NVDs, we know they're all reliable, and you can buy a book and have it there, and that's great. There are problems with paper NVDs, however, because not all the questions get answered all the time. They don't get filled out in full or completely. People don't sign them. There's also people who answer both yes and no to questions, so it's not clear what the actual answer is. Using the incorrect version or photocopying them is also a common issue that happens throughout the industry. So all these issues actually make NVDs invalid. So it means the person who's receiving it can't actually use it for what it was intended for. So it's a really big issue, and there is the electronic NVD system that we have in place, which actually precludes a lot of this stuff from happening. Because you can search for pics, you can add people in, it makes you answer all the questions, makes you sign it. So it actually uplifts that level of completion with the NVDs. But I'm going to pause there just for a little bit and allow Cherie to jump back on and have a chat to you all about the exciting new app that we have for the eNVD. So Cherie, I'll pause there and let you have a go.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Well done on getting through that, and it must be hard trying to present and the slides weren't there, but you did really, really well to get through that. So well done. Thanks everyone. This section's just to give you a bit of an update on the eNVD, and I think Elizabeth's given me a really good entrance into that topic just by talking about the complexities and troubles that we have with the paper forms. So I guess the big question is why transition to digital consignments? And I think the reasons are probably pretty clear, especially if you look at it from a traceability lens as well, together with the complexities and issues with paper forms. So when you look at a paper form, I guess you have the risk that you may inadvertently fill in an old form that's no longer valid. You may also find that the forms are hard to read or can get lost or just misfiled away. And and also just means that none of this information's being captured digitally, which requires a lot of double entry, a lot of double data entry as those stock move through the supply chain. So so there's a big shift to move to digital consignments. So part of the big push and where that kind of started was in 2018 when Integrity Systems Company launched the eNVD web system as a way to digitalise these processes, which includes your livestock assurance and your health declarations for your animals as well. The benefits of this, they don't get lost, ripped, damaged. They are easy to read. It reduces the amount of duplication that you need to keep doing, especially if you're consigning stock regularly. They are complete, they're always available, and you know, they are a legal and compliant document. But like with any new thing, there's always challenges. And the biggest one for the eNVD web system was no internet. So this was a big challenge and a big preventer that blocked a lot of members of the industry from being able to take up this, because where you might need to have internet, you didn't, as in down at the paddock, in the yards, places like that. So with that problem in mind, Integrity Systems Company went away again and created a app, which we launched in March this year. And it's a mobile app. It works side by side with the web system. It's constantly being updated. So there's a new update that came out just recently that addressed some significant issues around syncing. So that's, you know, that's come through, and we encourage anyone who's tried the app to remove that one from your system and upload the new version. Make sure you're using the newest version that's available now on both Android and App Store. So it works with the web system. So this means you can start a consignment at home in your office and finish it at the yards on your phone. So if your stock numbers change, you can tweak it there as well. And if your transporter arrives and you've got no internet, and so long as they're using the app, you can transfer the consignment from your app to their app. And once that transporter goes back into range and opens the app, all of that data will sync into place. So it just creates a streamlined system where the data is being held digitally, and then when they get to their destination, the same thing. Obviously, this needs everyone to be on board for this to work, and this is early days in this adoption. So we understand that, but I think the main thing to do is to check with your transporter, check with your receiver, talk to your agent, and see if they are ready and able to receive consignments in this way. If they're not, you can print it out from the app. You can send a PDF version of the consignment through the app as well. So there is that way, and you might think, well, what's the point of printing out something that's here? But there is a point, because it does mean the data is there and it can be picked up again. So it is worth it. And we know it's a big change for everyone to adopt, but we are out there working with all sectors of the supply chain to get this, you know, to get everyone aware of how to use it across the transport sector, the stock agents, sale yards, processors, feedlots. Yeah, there's a big push on adoption. So yeah, we really hope that everyone can keep giving it a go. But yeah, most important thing is check in with your receiver first to make sure, and if they're not able to receive a digital consignment, then you can organise for them to have a paper version from this device as well. So yeah, so I guess so there's, to help with this process, we have created a lot of different guides and help sheets on our website that you can see the web address there, and customer service team are ready and able to help with any questions that you might have about how to use it or any issues you're having. And like I said before, this app is constantly being revised and updated and upgraded, and improvements are coming through all the time. We've got a very busy tech team that are busy on this, and the feedback we get from industry is instrumental in ensuring that what we put to market is something that's going to work. So we really, really encourage you to give that feedback to us and let us know what you think could be better. We'd love to hear it. So please get in touch. So I think that's my part done. Yeah, I'll pass back to Elizabeth. She's going to talk to you about NLIS now. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Well, thanks, Cherie. Yes, so I'm going to talk just around the livestock identification system now, and just some general reminders about how it works and responsibilities in around this system. So just a quick note before I dive into the detail, we do have the NLIS database is just about 23 years old, and we are looking at upgrading that currently. But we are doing loads of work at the moment to make sure that it's ready for the next little while as well. So making sure that we've got the performance and the capacity to have all the sheep and goat data that will come through with sheep and goat eID coming into place in the next few years as well. So just a quick note that we are doing loads of stuff in the background, so it might not look different for a little while, but there's definitely stuff making sure it's fit for purpose in the back end. So yeah. The National Livestock Identification System is made up of 3 components. So the first is property identification codes, which is how we identify locations within Australia. So this is important because you need a PIC in Queensland to have be a registered biosecurity entity and then actually be able to order your NLIS tags. And that's really important because we need to know where livestock are. All people or companies or locations that receive livestock or have livestock actually have a PIC. So abattoirs, feedlots, sale yards, they all get a PIC, as well as producers as well. So everyone who needs to have a PIC can, and you get your PIC through your state department. So and that's important. So if you have an issue with your PIC or the name that's on your PIC or something related to it, you need to talk to the Queensland government, and they'll be able to update that for you. PICs are important because, as I mentioned, that's where your NLIS eID tags get registered to in the NLIS database. So you need to have a PIC in order to order tags. And it's also helpful because we can actually apply statuses or flags to PICs as well in the database, which allows us to track if there's an outbreak or a contamination risk or something of that nature as well. So PICs are really important. And yeah, so the second component of the NLIS is animal identification. I know there's a lot of information around sheep and goat eID, so I'll leave that to the Queensland government to tell you a little bit more in just a little bit, but I'll just give you an overview of sort of how animal identification works and a little bit about eIDs. So eIDs, or visual tags, if in the current sheep and goat system that are approved for NLIS, actually go through field trials with ISC, and they have to bear the NLIS logo on them. So they can be visual or electronic in nature. So the electronic ones have the little microchip in them, which you can read electronically with the reader. And if it's an eID, it's 1 tag per animal. So that's important because if you have more than 1 eID tag, the scanner might not know which one to scan. So it's really important there's only ever 1 eID put on an animal. For cattle, it is an eID all across Australia, and that needs to go on its right ear. And sheep and goats, the tag can go in either ear. It's really important to follow the application instructions for different types of tags, because there are lots of different types of tags available from different manufacturers, and they have instructions on how to apply them, and in some cases specific applicators that you need to use. So just because you've got one in the shed doesn't mean you can use it for every single tag that you have. You need to be really careful about what you're buying and how you're applying it as well, because that can impact retention if you're not using the right pin or the applicator and things of that nature. Other things to remember is the colour of tags. So for cattle, there's a 2-colour system. So white tags for cattle mean that those animals were born on that property, and it's called a breeder tag. The other colour is orange, and orange tags relate to post-breeder, which means that that animal wasn't born on that property, and it needs to have an orange tag put in because it's lost its original white tag. So they're the two tags. If a tag has fallen out for some reason, and you need to replace it, if it's an eID, you can and you have the previous white breeder tag, you can actually do a link in the database to a new tag to keep that lifetime traceability of that eID. So that's a really handy tool if you do have the tag. Otherwise, it's just the orange tag for that animal. For sheep and goats, they have their year of birth colour. So that's all the different colours designating which year that tag was made, or that sheep or goat was born. And then that's for the breeder tags. And then for post-breeder, the colour is always pink. So sheep and goats not born on that property need to have a pink tag popped into their ear as well. The other thing around electronic identification devices, or eIDs for short, is there's 2 numbers for the NLIS that sort of get linked together to provide unique traceability at the individual animal level. So the first one's the RFID number, and this one gets coded into that little microchip that actually sits inside the plastic of the tag. So that's a unique 16-digit character that the manufacturers that you buy the tags off actually create and keep unique. And they link that number to something called the visual tag number, or the NLIS eID. And so that ID number that that is the visual one that gets laser printed on the outside of the tag, and it contains your pick. So when you actually buy the tags, it gets added to your pick in the database, but it also has that pick on the outside, so you can actually see that that's your tag. There's some other codes within that visual tag as well, or visual number on the tag, I should say. So one is the letter that represents the supplier or the manufacturer who gave you that tag or you bought it off. The other one is the designation for the species and whether or not it's a breeder or a post-breeder tag. So if it's cattle and it's a breeder tag, you get the letter B, which is up on screen there. The next letter in that code is the year it was made, and then you get a serial number which talks around the uniqueness of that tag. So if you buy 1,000 tags, you could have 1 0 to 1,000 or 1 to 1,000 in that relationship. So eIDs are able to be scanned with readers that you can buy from suppliers. ISC don't accredit or approve readers, but they're readily available for purchase. And those scanners actually will pick up the RFID number, and then you can transfer those and then collate that list of RFIDs every time you scan, and then transfer that from your scanner to your computer, and that allows you to do that transfer in the NLIS database, which is the next part of the NLIS. So this is sort of where it's really important to do these movement recordings, and it's actually again on the receiver of the livestock to do that movement. So that's a legal requirement set through legislation. It's really up to the person receiving to have that responsibility on them, but that doesn't preclude someone who's selling livestock to do that transfer as well if you have the capability, the scanner, all that sort of stuff. In relation to transfers, you can use the visual number or the RFID number if you've got both or either. You can actually do that transfer in the database using that. The other things to look for in this is you can actually create an NLIS account yourself if you don't have one. It's encouraged that you do that. You can run reports and see what's on your pick, what's been moved on and what's been moved off, and you can reconcile sort of and everything in case you've lost some tags or some livestock as well. So the other part of transfers is that if you're selling through a sale yard or to a feedlot or to a processor, they'll complete that transfer for you. So they're the ones receiving the livestock, so they're required to do that movement. It's really just important if you're selling to another producer that you really do those checks, or you're using a livestock agent, that you're checking that they've actually done those transfers correctly and in the time frame. So there's a 48-hour time frame from receival that you should be doing those. Selling platforms like Auctions Plus and Gumtree don't do those transfers for you, so it's really important if you are using those avenues that you're doing those transfers when you bring livestock onto your property. If you are using an agent or you want to check, you can actually ask them to give you an upload ID and check that yourself against your account. It's basically just a receipt number that you can look up, and it will tell you sort of the details of those livestock being transferred on or off your pick. The other thing that you can do is actually add in the NVD serial number for livestock as well. So when you receive that NVD from the person who's selling you the livestock, you can actually put that NVD serial number into the NLIS with that transfer, and that links the two programs together. So we've got a history of both animal treatment and that movement, as well as the transfer of the tags. So the two work in conjunction, but that's recording the movements in the database, which is really, really important, because if we don't know where they've been moved to, we can't actually trace them. So that's the key around NLIS. But I'm done talking now. So what I'm going to do is hand over to David McNabb from Queensland Biosecurity, who's going to run you through an eID update in relation to where Queensland's up to. So David, over to you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And if you can put that, yeah, sure. So just quick bit of information on a significant change to the identification systems in Australia, but definitely in Queensland, is late last year, after many years of discussion and debate, all the jurisdictions and industry has agreed to implement electronic identification for the sheep and goat industry. So the agreed timeline on that was to commence that from 1st of January 2025. The federal government committed $46 million of funding to do that. And as you've heard Elizabeth talk about, there's significant upgrades going on to the database at the moment. So the federal government's committed $26 million to that, and the remaining 20 will be divided up between the states. Queensland government also in their recent budget did also announce funding for the implementation of sheep and goat eID in Queensland. I'm just not I don't have the details to be able to discuss that today. That is still being worked through a working group that's been established in Queensland to roll out the implementation. But I can give you assurance that there will be funding to support industry implement that, and it's all parts of the supply chain, including processors and sale yards as they need to adjust and adapt, as indeed the cattle industry did back when they implemented that. So what is sheep and goat eID? Well, I probably don't need to go into too much detail because Elizabeth has basically told you what it is. It is exactly the same as the cattle NLIS system. So the current system for sheep and goats is what we call a mob-based system, and they use a visual identifier. And on your paperwork and on your traceability systems, it just identifies that 100 animals have moved from point A to point B. With the individual system, it tracks that individual's lifetime of movements. You put a tag in before it moves from your property, and that tag stays with it for life, and we can track each individual animal's movements across its entire lifetime. And that gives us far, far better traceability components than the current mob-based system. Just next slide, thanks. So again, it's exactly the same technology as the cattle NLIS system. We know it works. It's been in place in Australia since 2005. And indeed, Victoria implemented sheep and goat mandatory electronic identification in 2017, and we know it's working very well down there. So we're looking at Victoria, the way they did it, and learning from them. But the big reason that we're doing it, as I say, the current mob-based system of tracking sheep at the moment can only give us about 70% accuracy on our traceability. And more importantly than that, that 70% takes weeks to achieve. So in the face of an emergency animal disease, our traceability system for sheep and goats is going to fail us, unfortunately, whereas our cattle system, we know, can give us 99%, and more important than that, 99% virtually instantaneously with our capacity to interrogate the database. So we can achieve those things really rapidly, which is going to support our emergency animal disease responses. Just the next slide there, thanks. So as I've already said, why are we implementing this? Clearly last year there, when Indonesia popped up with foot and mouth disease and lumpy skin disease, obviously an intense focus was put on our Australian capability and preparedness aspects for dealing with a significant outbreak like that. And foot and mouth, you've probably all seen it, you know, we're quoting figures of impact of $80 billion, massive hit to our livestock industry. The quicker we can, if we do get foot and mouth in Australia, the quicker we can get on top of it, the quicker we get back into our export markets and lessen that impact. And as I say, if it takes us days and indeed weeks to trace our sheep, that means we're going to be out of those markets for months. Whereas if we can manage to get on top of it very rapidly, within days and or weeks, we won't be locked out of our export markets. So its value, the cattle NLIS system value to our preparedness activities cannot be overstated. It gives us such an extreme ability to get in front of a disease and on top of it so quickly that you know, all the other countries in the world look at our system with extreme envy. So that's why the reason we're putting it in place for the sheep. And there I should be important, sorry, just as you flick to that next slide, that's okay. You know, there is a strong chance that it's been analysed that there is and indeed they've quoted a 56% chance of a significant animal disease incursion in the next 5 years. That's not just FMD, I should say, that includes lumpy skin disease, which is a significant worry to our cattle industry as well. Thanks, Ed. Next slide. So just Queensland sheep industry, I just put those figures up because I'll talk about the timelines of when we implemented here soon as well. I just put those figures up because Queensland doesn't have a huge sheep industry. We hold approximately 3% of the national flock. So we're very supportive of a national approach to implementing this, but we don't have any major sheep processing capacity. Virtually all our sheep, the overwhelming majority of our sheep, end up in New South Wales and Victoria for slaughtering capacity. And we don't have too many even larger scale sale yards. Some on the border there do trade in a few. So we're going to be locked into indeed what the other states' timelines are, because it's a little bit pointless us having different timelines to them, because as soon as you want to transport sheep to interstate slaughtering facilities, you're going to have to comply with their requirements. What we do have is a bigger portion of the rangeland goat industry. I make that very clear about rangeland goats, because obviously we have significant numbers of those feral animals, and we have a significant processor out there in Charleville, so based in Western Queensland. And there is a few issues there around how we'll deal with those rangeland goats and the new system, and I'll talk about those soon. So just the next slide there, thanks. So the proposed timelines at this point in time is, as of 1st of January 2025, all new lambs and kids that are moved from a pick must have the electronic device in their ear. Okay, so that's coming in 2025. The current system still will be in place for any animals that are currently tagged with the visual system. So there's still the mob-based system will run concurrent for a small period of time, but as of 1 January 25, new lambs and kids must have the electronic identification tag in their ear. We've got a 2-year phase-in process, so as of 1st January 2027, it then will be about all sheep and goats that are moving must have the electronic tag. So keep those two dates in mind, because despite the fact we're sort of saying 1 January 2025, if you are indeed marking lambs and kids, you know, late 24, and they're going to be something that you're keeping for a period of time, you should give strong consideration to utilising the electronic identification system. Those tags can be bought now. There are multiple manufacturers of those in Australia already, obviously because Victoria has the compulsory system, but many producers are also using it for management processes as well. So next slide, please there. So again, this is probably just confirming what Elizabeth was talking about there before. The new system will allow you to tag in either ear. The colour component is not legislated in Queensland, but it's just a strong industry practice that is utilised to identify ages, and that can certainly continue on. And sheep and farm goats can be tagged in either ear, yeah. Currently, the sheep eID tags are looking at about $1.50 to $2, depending on which tag exactly that you're using and which manufacturer that you're going to use. But the process is exactly the same as the cattle system. It's before they move from a property, and then they must be tagged with the tag, and then they must be transferred on the NLIS database. So everything's going to be exactly the same. Your eNVDs stay the same, your NVDs stay the same, etc., etc. It's just moving the system from the cattle world into the sheep and goat world. Next one there, thanks. So rangeland goats, there will be some what we call pathways for rangeland goats. Call them feral, whatever you like, but there is some specific requirements in and around that. It is only from the property where they have been harvested to slaughter to a processing facility. And again, in Queensland, we have a major facility out there in Charleville. There is one nuance around that, in that they can be accumulated at depots, and we currently have that system in place in Queensland. There is current exemption pathways for those rangeland goats. But there is a quite clear definition of what makes a rangeland goat, and that is what is up on the screen there at the moment, and that's been agreed to nationally as well. So it's not been born as a result of a breeding program. It's not been subjected to husbandry practices, and it's not held behind wire. So we're talking genuine, the feral goat, rangeland goat population that we have in Australia. Now, the reason we'll continue with that is because that is a direct movement from point A to slaughter, and our traceability indeed is actually still captured in that context. It's not captured in that process where you're breeding with them deliberately and moving them from point A to point B. So as soon as those animals are maybe harvested, captured, and you decide to maybe start a breeding program with them or move them to other properties, then they fall under the auspices of the full electronic identification system. This information, we're just going to roll out a series of information workshops across Queensland very, very soon. It has taken a little bit longer than we anticipated, but that QTAG group, the advisory body that's been formed in Queensland, we've been working through some of the policy issues and the implementation processes, and we're at the stage now where we can start to communicate that. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be advertising those widely very soon, but it's anticipated they'll be kicking off in 3 or 4 weeks' time, so to communicate more information. So that's where we're at there. Thanks, Sheree.
Thanks, David. Thanks very much. Look, this is the final part of our webinar today. So keep your questions coming though, because we've got our people ready to answer in the background. But just to finish off, this is a compilation of Q&A videos, just runs for a few minutes, of producers from other states that have adopted eID on their sheep. The first one, Scott Young from Victoria. He's been using eID for a number of years and is getting lots of great results from it as he extends the use of it into a broader capacity. Russell Fowler from Tasmania is the second person that pops up on this video reel, talking about how he's using it as well, and Jenny Bradley in New South Wales. So just thought this might give you all a bit of a perspective from a producer's side of things on how it's all going for them. So we'll just play that video for you now. It just goes for a few minutes, so I'll see you at the end of that. Thanks.
I think that key benefit just comes back to that individual animal traceability. Whether it be for my prime lamb operation or for a wool operation, being able to use that data that I collect and improve my business. You know, also what we've seen in Victoria is by being able to trace that individual animal, we can get up to 99% traceability within the system. Being able to look back at the treatments that I've given my animals over time and manage drench rotations, withholding periods, all these things on the system. I use True Test system, and these alerts come up as the animals go through my handler that they're still within withholding periods, you know, and I can make sure that I'm not sending animals to market that are within those withholding periods. I was quite surprised. I thought we might have had issues with tag retention rates and failure of the actual eID tags, but quite surprised that this hasn't been an issue at all. With the system, as they go through my handler, it automatically it won't let the animal go through the handler unless the eID has been read. So straight away, if there is a tag in the animal and it's not reading that, I know that I need to replace that tag.
Last year, we had a bout of pneumonia. So most people were sort of finding out about it around the March period, whereas we knew about it in December because we're able to monitor our weight gains and we could see that there was an issue, and then we were able to find out what it was. I mean, admittedly, with pneumonia, you can't do anything about it. Our real win with that was meaning we weren't taking our contracts because we weren't getting our weight gains. So we could see that was happening. So we weren't booking in lambs and not being able to fill those contracts, which was the real benefit with that one. So we're like trying to give those people that are buying our lambs to finish, more data for them to utilise.
So, and that index gain is a combination of lots of its growth, birth weights, maternal weaning weight, fat, muscle. It's all those traits put together into one index. So over a period of time there, basically from the adoption of eID, you can see that compared to the average of the breed, we're probably moving in a nice trending line upwards. There's a number of factors in there, but that capture and use of that data through eID has been one of the major key drivers. But as I said, there's a lot of data points to be collected. The eID, individual identification of an animal, you can place all those data collection points against that animal. Remembering it doesn't go to the eID, it's only identifying the animal, but that data goes against that individual animal, and then you can use that to drive your business using your breeding objectives. It's just our auto drafter and our computer program that's compatible with our auto drafter, and we've got, when we're doing any data collection, or any sorting of these sheep, there's probably 3 or 4 of us in the yard. So we can actually put in there, into that auto drafter, that we want to draft off anything that's carrying really high levels of fat and muscle. They'll draft them off. Pregnancy scanning status, they'll draft off. Remember, see, there's no paint on these sheep either. The data you enter is the data it will draft on, and it just makes life easy. It's actually taken a person out of the yards as well. Okay, I think that's the end of that clip. Look, that brings us to the end of the webinar. These are some helpful contacts if you'd like to get in touch with us to give feedback on anything, find out more information about the eNVD app. There's QR codes there to download the app. And yeah, we just encourage you to check out our resources and get in touch if you have any questions at all. We're very happy to help deal with any problems that you might be having with this. The last thing, I think we have a survey that we're popping in the chat now. It'd be great if you could fill it in and give us some feedback. And if there's any other topics you'd like us to cover in future webinars, we'd love to know about that. Yeah, I think that brings us to the end. So I just want a big thank you to David McNabb for joining from Biosecurity Queensland. It was really great having you on board. And thanks to Elizabeth for explaining LPA, George, Romy, Callum, thank you for answering questions today. And we've got Alistair running the slides in the background. Thank you so much, Alistair, for that as well. So I think that's everything. Just finally, this disclaimer, we can't do this all for you, but we're definitely here to help. And that's our role as Integrity Systems Company, is here to help and support industry. So please get in touch and reach out if you have any questions. Otherwise, thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Thank you.